All right, hello, everyone. So, this is a bit of an explainer video for a project I've been working on. So, uh, this is a Destiny history test. It's based on AP history tests, like actual history tests, rather than just like a trivia competition about the history of Destiny. I made one like a while ago, back in November, and it was really fun. And it got it got a lot of people responding and being active in it. So I decided to do it again. And this one is a bit different. It's bigger. And we actually have prizes this time. Top 8 scores will get spot glosses from ARH. You do have to score over 70 points though, which shouldn't be too hard. So this is kind of a video going over sorry. This is kind of a video going over what it's actually going to be about. So this is the structure. It's less, there's less stuff on it than actual AP history tests. Actual AP history tests have a document based question, which is really difficult, and I cut that. And I actually kind of cut down the essay question a bit. But yeah, basically there are 55 multiple choice questions. There's 1 point each. They're all in sets of 2 to 4. Mostly, like most of them are like three questions. And there's going to be some kind of visual stimulus, and so we'll get into what that means later. But each of these multiple choice questions is worth 1 point. There's no guessing penalty, so just you won't lose points for wrong answers. It's just you only get points if you get one right. There's 3 short answer questions, which are pretty easy. We'll go over those, and there's an essay, which is it's really not that hard. It's not like super formal or anything. So this is an example of a multiple choice question. Most of them this is from the one I made in November. So there's this little passage from an article, and it's sourced. You can see the date, you can see who posted it, and usually they'll be about this long. There's some that are longer, there are some that are shorter. Like I think the first one on this one is really long, but most of them are pretty short. And then I'll ask you some questions about it. So this one is talking about Snoke being released and him being good, almost as good as Yoda. And he says in the PS, keep an eye for the next set group where a lot of the hero stuff phases out and villains rise. It's going to be Empire time, my friends. So this question down here, passage was written in a meta, blah blah blah. So that kind of asks you to look at the date that it was published, look at the characters that he's talking about, and kind of like infer from some of the writing, like what was the meta like. And then I ask you to analyze the argument and put it in a historical context, and then this is also that. So pause for a bit, see if you can try and come up with the correct answer, and then we'll move on. All right. Here are the answers. So this passage was written in a meta immediately after a set release, and we can see that, if you know the date, you know the date. You don't have to though. Nothing on this test is going to require that you know the date, but you can also infer from some of the stuff. This is called his I don't know how to pronounce his name. His Way of the Force picks. So that's usually something that an article like that is usually something that's written at the start of a new format. So we can kind of see that, and we can also like talk about how we knew he was going to be good, but now that we're actually like seeing it, so you can kind of infer that it was a meta immediately after a set release. So the argument made in the first paragraph is essentially that Snoke is really, really good, and he would be the best card of the set if I did not see a trend for decks to go into hyper aggression instead of heavy control meta. And so that argument would end up being proven wrong because Snoke was used in the aggressive decks described in the passage. So we had Kylo Snoke that was used. The other answers we can eliminate. Incorrect, because aggro decks did not take hold of the meta. That's wrong. We did see a lot of aggro decks rise in the Way of the Force meta. Correct, because the meta became dominated by aggressive decks. No, not really, because there were a lot of mill decks and there were a lot of support decks that were also there at the time. Correct, because aggro decks acted as a gatekeeper that kept Snoke out of tier 1, and we know that's also wrong because Snoke was definitely tier 1 during that format. So that leaves us with this answer. And then the argument made in the PS would go on to be proven. So the PS says, keep an eye out for the next set group. We kind of went over that. So that's basically, he's arguing that when Convergence releases and that cycle comes out, then villains are going to become dominant, when at the time it was heroes that were more dominant. And so we can see that was correct, because villain decks would gain a lot from the release of Convergence. Now we can also eliminate the rest, because we can eliminate correct as villain decks became more played than hero decks after rotation. That's not really like his argument. His argument is about the hero stuff phasing out and villains rising. So that's not really correct. Incorrect as villains ended up I misspelled that. Ended up losing more from rotation than predicted. We know that's wrong because that didn't happen. Incorrect as hero ended up making up for its losses in rotation with the release of Convergence. They didn't. Heroes got some stuff out of Convergence, but overall it became a much more villain-dominated meta. So now another type of source that you might see is a deck list. And so you might be asked to look at that deck list. So this is from, it's kind of truncated a bit, but it's from Killer Phoenix, from ABG. And he actually got most of these questions wrong when he took the test. So let's see if you can get them right. So we have this deck. It's from a regional on October 26th, 2020. So that's, if you remember correctly, that was soon after Worlds 2020, I guess. So wait, was this 2020? October 20? Wait, I think this might have actually been from 2019. I might have wrote this down wrong. So wait. Oh god, let me think. October 2020. Yeah, that would have been like in the middle of COVID, and this was not in the middle of COVID. Yeah, so this should be October 26th, 2019. Soon after the World Championship. And we can see a couple interesting things. Thrawn, Sentinel Messenger, Greedo. This is a really weird pairing. If you've looked at, if you've played a lot of Destiny, you know that this looks really, really weird. 3-die start with Thrawn, and it looks like it's a support deck. We also notice like Fist and Delve. If you remember the meta at Worlds 2019, that was a big thing. So questions we get, you can pause, take a look at them, ask you about meta trends, it asks you about like why he would play this deck, it asks you about advantages and disadvantages of the deck. So pause, think. All right, now let's look at the answers. So deck's an example of which meta trend? The power of Delve Fist to make subpar decks competitive. That's good, because as we see, this is a weird deck that ended up winning a regional because of the power of Delve Fist. Strength of Theed Royal Palace. Well, I mean, it's not really an example of that. It does have Theed Royal Palace, but that's not really like the best answer. The ubiquitousness of Sentinel Messenger. Again, it's not like the best. That's not the best answer. Sentinel Messenger was in the deck, but it's not really the big thing. The use of Delve Fist in decks that you wouldn't expect the combo to be played in. And that's not correct, because we would expect Delve Fist to be played in this. It's not like a weird deck we wouldn't expect to play it. And another example of that would be like Maul Commando running Delve Fist because it was so strong. So some of the answers are going to be tricky. This is kind of a hard question. But yeah, that's the best answer. Killer Phoenix most likely chose to play this deck because he wanted to prove a point and play a unique deck. And the point he wanted to prove was that Delve Fist was really, really good, and this deck is obviously very unique. I don't think it ever got played in another competitive event, really. It was a team deck for the event. We can eliminate that because it wasn't. We don't have enough information to prove that. It's just, yeah, and it wasn't. It's a weird deck. We wouldn't expect it to be a team deck. He wanted to have fun with a casual deck. Well, not really. This isn't really a casual deck. It is built to be competitive. He believed it was the most optimal choice given the meta. Probably not, because, if it was, we probably would have seen it rise a lot more popularity than it did. So, yeah, this is the best answer. One advantage of this team compared to other supports in the given meta is the ability to play No Good to Me Dead. That's wrong, because all support decks have the ability to do that. It has more health than other villain support decks. No, it doesn't, because Forlom, which was the big support deck, actually had more health than it, and it had even more reliable ways of gaining health through cards like Modular Frame. It has more damage sides than its character dice. That's not really an advantage in support decks, and even like compared to Forlom, it's not really true. Actually, yeah, no, because Forlom has 4 dice. They all have damage sides. So it's not really a huge advantage either, because support decks want to be gaining money. So the best answer is Thrawn's ability allows for more control, because yeah, it does. Thrawn's ability allows you to play your opponent's removal. So that's the big advantage. A disadvantage is its lack of resource sides on its starting dice, right? Like if we go back, Thrawn only has 1 side, Sentinel has 1, Greedor doesn't even have any. So that's a big advantage. Its lack of significant hand control, that's wrong, because we can see it ran counterintelligence and it ran probe. So it has that. Its inability to kill a character quickly. No real support decks have that. So it's not really a disadvantage. And the fact that it played Separatist Embargo, a lot of decks did, some didn't. Did this deck even play Separatist Embargo? I think it did. Yeah, it did. There was one. Sometimes I'll throw in like random like questions that are obviously wrong. Like, did the deck list include this card? No. All right, so let's move on. Another example is data. My camera's kind of obscuring this, so I'll move it out of the way. So this is the from Higher Belt Destiny. It's the distribution of the decks in the top 8 of 37 Legacies regionals. And this was published in April 2018. So if you remember, which you don't have to, but you might remember that that's like right before a balance update that hit, running interference, Maul's lightsaber, things like that. And again, you don't really have to know these specific dates, but just if you do, it helps you. So we got questions that ask you what can be inferred about the meta from this chart based on and this is like a can you read the graph, and then this is a what leads to this situation question. So let's take a look at the answers. Wait, I guess I should give you time. Okay, time. Wait, think. All right, answers. So what can be inferred about the Legacies meta from this chart? Many decks were competitive. Yeah, we see a wide range. We don't see any chart being any like particular deck being too strong. Based on the data, what was the deck that won the most regionals? And keep in mind, we don't have enough information because this is just decks in the top 8. So this is it's a really, really tricky one. Well, not really. It's not really tricky. If you read the question carefully enough, you'll be able to tell. And the diversity of decks in the meta is most likely a result of this is just do you know why the Legacies meta was diverse? And it's because the even distribution of powerful cards among archetypes. We didn't really have one that was super like one card that was like super strong and that was only in this one faction. It was pretty even. Balance changes that hit top tier decks. Again, that wouldn't come about until after this was published. So we can tell that. And also if you just remember generally about the Legacies meta, was that really successful because of balance changes? No, there was generally a high level of diversity even before and also after the balance changes. The casual approach that took heart in most players during this format, this isn't really true because we didn't really we had a pretty even mix of casual and competitive players, and this is at the top 8 of regionals, so like these players are going to be pretty competitive. And the lack of strong characters, this is also wrong because there are lots of really strong characters like Yoda, Hondo. These are powerful characters that exist in this format, so that makes this the best answer. All right, now short answer. I'm gonna move my camera back. So this is a writing one. And it's from the November test. So there's certain this is a pretty easy one because it doesn't really ask you to do that much. This just says name, identify. For these, you really just have to say like one thing. If it says explain, you might have to do a bit more work. But this really just asks you to name a thing and like relate it to a historical context. So this is a deck from Zach Bunn, top 32 at Worlds 2019. So the question is name one way in this deck was similar to other Raylo decks, one way in which is different, and identify one way in which the choices made in deck building affected a matchup with a meta deck at Worlds 2019. So I'm going to pause And let's think about this, and I'm going to show you some correct answers, some incorrect answers, why they would earn the point, and why they wouldn't. So, and keep in mind, these questions total are worth 9 points, with each one of these little bits being worth 3. All right, think. Okay, so here are some answers. One way which is similar, and so most people got it right. These were the only wrong answers that I could find, and these 3 were all great. This one down here is actually overboard, but it definitely gets the point. So the weapon package, yeah, that's right. We saw crossguard, dagger, Maul's lightsaber, Rey's lightsaber, treasured lightsaber. These were all pretty common. Lots of ways to interact with shields. That's also right. We have polarity. What are some other cards in the deck? Polarity, pacifies, unbreakable. Lots of cards that work with shields, and that's big in Reylo. So that definitely earns the point. And then this one, a focus on every Reylo deck is always having shield generation, and the struggle of most Reylo decks at the time was affording all the cards they wanted to play. Therefore, similar to other Reylo decks, Bun's list included 2 copies of Luke's Protection and of Adapt from the very get-go. So yeah, this earns the point because these cards were used in Reylo decks all the time. So, wrong answers, it played Temporary Truce. Real answer, played Theed. So I'll just ignore the Temporary Truce part. That's obviously too vague. Real answer, it played Theed. And this is actually wrong because Theed was not actually super standard. Most Reylo decks actually ran Bendu's Lair or Obi-Wan's Hut. Theed was not super standard in Reylo decks at the time. And then upgrades, that's just too vague. I gave it 1 point, but specifically saying the weapon package is better. Upgrades, that's just, it's too vague. But most people did really well on the question. This one a bit harder. One way in this deck was different. So easy answers. He played Maul's lightsaber. Yeah, that's a difference. Most decks didn't, but Zach Bun did. No questions asked. Spicy one-off. That's also true. These were both interesting tech cards that were included in this deck that weren't included in the other ones. And again, this one it gives a lot, and it definitely earns a point. Most players treat Reylo like a combo aggro / burn deck with the ability to generate additional health in your shields. Bun's list differs as it runs more upgrades, and Theed Palace have a stronger mid to end game board state. This is very accurately not only identifying but explaining the difference between this deck and other Reylo decks. So things that didn't get the point. It is much heavier on upgrades and really plays into the advantage of overriding them for come into play effects. So the overriding thing is actually something that basically every Reylo deck does. With Neiman, Treasured Lightsaber. So this is wrong because every Reylo deck does that. Didn't run Mind Extraction for Palp. This was not a super common thing. So while it's true that this deck didn't run it, other Reylo decks also didn't often run it because Palpatine was actually a fairly winnable matchup for Reylo. Playing Luke's Protection, and again, this is wrong because lots of Reylo decks played Luke's Protection. All right, and then this is identifying one way in which the choices made in deck building affected a matchup with a particular deck at Worlds, with a meta deck at Worlds 2019. So you have to really do 3 things in this question. You have to talk about a choice, you have to talk about a matchup, and you have to make a connection, how did that affect the matchup. So it angled the pop low health droids, Atari Strike, unblockable from Treasured, Maul's lightsaber, cut shields. And this is great. It's talking about choices, including Atari Strike, unblockable from Treasured lightsaber, Maul's lightsaber, and it's talking about how these cards, cutting shields, doing unblockable damage, pop droids. So in kind of a roundabout way, it earns a point there. Maul's lightsaber was in the deck to help push more damage into high HP decks like Afra and Forlum, where Kylo's special wasn't as effective. So this also earns a point because it talks about Maul's lightsaber as a choice. It talks about the matchups into Afra and Forlum, and it talks about how Maul's lightsaber helped push more damage into these decks. And this is, if you read Bun's write-up on the deck, that's actually one of the main reasons that he talks about including Maul's lightsaber is to do better into these matchups. The choices Bun made when building this deck indicate that he teched for a longer board state matchups after Forlum Yellow Palpatine at the cost of sacrificing some of his burst potential in turn 1 to 2, weakening his droids / Red Palpatine matchups. So he's talking about the choice is teching for longer board state matchups, and And he also includes another one sacrificing some of his matchups on turn 1 to 2. So he's talking about that choice, he's talking about the matchup, and he's saying how it affects that. So that's really what you have to do. The guy rolled in so many Dark Council specials. This it doesn't talk about a choice, it doesn't talk about a matchup, and it doesn't make a connection between those two because there's not there. So this obviously doesn't get the point. Inability to deal with wide boards and inevitable ramp from support decks. This again, it doesn't talk about a choice. It kind of talks about a matchup, but it's not very specific. It talks about support decks, but like again, it doesn't talk about a choice in deck building. Give the opportunity to hit a big die into the pool twice. So we're assuming like they would be referencing Muld's Lightsaber is doing that, but it doesn't talk about a matchup, so it doesn't get the point. All right. The essay. It's not a formal essay. There's not any required format. I'm not going to be grading about grammar or spelling or anything. Just content. So there's going to be 3 provided questions. You only have to answer 1. So you can pick the one that you know best. And there's 6 points, and we're going to kind of go over some of them. So there's a thesis, which basically you have to establish a thesis that responds to the prompt and creates a line of reasoning. So this would be like it has to make a claim, mention evidence, like it has to be something you can disagree with. You can't just restate the prompt. You have to actually answer it. Contextualization, this is basically like, do you relate it to what's happening before or after it? Usually before. So like the way that this would usually be done is like you would put a little paragraph like before your thesis saying like leading up to this event, blah, 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 right? And it's usually just like 2 to 3 sentences. None to worry about. Evidence. That's basically like, can you bring up evidence to support your thesis? Analysis is, can you explain why your evidence supports your thesis? And this complexity is really hard to earn on AP history tests, so I wouldn't try to worry about it. It's basically like, can you explain the nuance of a topic in depth? And so yeah, I wouldn't worry about it. And so we're not going to talk about it. So this is just like a sample. This is going to be on the test. I'm not using one from a previous one because the November one didn't have an essay on it. So this is a cut one from the current test. And I cut it because it's really specific. And I didn't want this to be specific. So it says, evaluate the extent to which the meta shifted from Gen Con 2018 to Nova 2018. So let's think about information. So what was the meta at Gen Con? It was Mill. Mill won that event. In fact, it was a Mill mirror in the finals. It was an Afra mirror in the finals at Nova. That's what I was thinking of. But Mill dominated that event. Afra did okay. There's an Afra in the top 4. We saw Thousand Commandos come second place. So that's just stuff that you might remember offhand about the event. And Nova, we had Afra dominating. And we had blue villains make the top 4, like Dooku Talzin, Kylo Price. So, let's talk about the thesis. So, which one of these do you think earns the point? Think about it. So, we have the meta shifted a lot from Gen Con 2018 to Nova 2018. We have Mill won Gen Con, while Afra won Nova. We have the meta shifted significantly in Gen Con 2018 and Nova 2018 because Afra became much more dominant and Mill became less popular. So, think about it. Did only one of these earn the point? Did they all earn it? Did none of them earn it? All right, I'm going to reveal in 3, 2, 1. Only this one earns it. Because this one, the meta shifted a lot from Gen Con 2018 to Nova 2018. It doesn't really establish a line of reasoning. It kind of just like says that there was a change, but it doesn't mention evidence. It doesn't really respond. So Mill won Gen Con while Afra won Nova. This is just a statement of fact. It doesn't really respond to the prompt. So it doesn't earn the point. And then this one, the meta shifted significantly between Gen Con 2018 and Nova 2018. That's answering the question. Because Afra became much more dominant and Mill became less popular. That's mentioning your evidence. It's creating a line of reasoning. I can say, yeah, I agree. I do think. Or I could say, I disagree. I don't think that was a shift. But either way, it's arguable. So it earns a point. All right. Contextualization. So, this is what happens after, before, during, usually used before. that would be my tip, is always use before. It should just be 2 to 4 sentences. Usually it'd be like right in your first paragraph, like right before your thesis. So an example, here's 2 examples. 1. Gen Con 2018 took place soon after the release of Way of the Force, so the meta was not set in stone. People expected decks like Kylo Price to do well, but in reality, a mill deck won the tournament. Or example 2, during Legacies, the meta was very diverse. Many different decks were competitive. This brings us to the release of Way of the Force, of which Gen Con was the first event of. So which one of these do you think earned the point? And here's the answer in 3, 2, 1. It's only the first one. Because this stuff, talking about Legacies, is not really relevant to the argument about the meta shifting. So this first one does, because it talks about like what people expected to do well, and then like what actually did well. So it's kind of setting up your argument. Evidence and analysis. So you get 1 point for identifying pieces of evidence, at least 2, and you get 2 points for using those to support an argument. So a 1 point example would be an Afro deck placed in the top 4 of Gen Con, but the finals of Nova was an Afro mirror match, right? So this is, you're identifying a piece of evidence here, but you haven't quite used it to support your argument yet. And so to get a second point, you would say, this supports my argument because it shows that the position of Afra in the meta rose between the 2 events, right? So that's kind of explaining like why your evidence supports your argument. And then you get like the analysis point for basically doing this throughout the entire essay. So yeah. We're not going to really talk about the complexity point because I don't think you guys should be worrying about it. So yeah, that's this. I hope you have fun. It was really fun to make this. It'll be fun to grade what you guys write. Yeah. Enjoy.